Welcome to Better Sex, where you get the information and inspiration to create and enjoy your best possible sex life. Join your host, sex therapist Jessa Zimmerman, as she brings you expert guests, helpful tips, knowledge, and strategies to improve your intimate relationships. And now, your host, Jessa Zimmerman.
Hey, this is Jessa. Welcome back to another episode of the Better Sex Podcast. I'm so glad you're here. I'm so thankful that you have tuned in. Before I start today, I want to invite you. I have this little widget on my website on bettersexpodcast.com. It's called SpeakPipe, and it allows you to record up to like a 3-minute message for me, like a question. And sometimes I take those questions and answer them on air. But I'm thinking I would love to hear from people if you want to go on there and just leave a comment, a little story about, a misconception about sex, something you didn't understand about sex. And if I get some of these, maybe I'll put them all together and make part of an episode about that and just sort of share the story. So don't use your name or maybe just a first name. But if you're willing to go to the website, leave a comment and let me know something you didn't understand about sex, that you figured out, I guess, since then. I'd love to have you participate. Today's episode is a personal story, and I love doing these too. I mean, I often interview experts or sometimes just, get on my soapbox and talk to you. But the personal stories are really, really meaningful to me. And I feel so honored that people are willing to come on and share about their sex life and their sexual expression in life and their relationships. And, it means a lot. And I think it's really impactful for listeners. At least that's what I hear. If you ever want to do this, by the way, you can also get in touch with me through the podcast website, because I love doing these personal stories. I do them anonymously. So you don't need to worry about that. But if you're willing to share yours, I'd love to hear it. I'm talking to Camille, and she's sharing the story about getting into sex at a relatively young age and really, really unprepared for it. She ended up marrying that first boyfriend. So they've now had a life together and they've got 2 kids of their own and stuff. But she had quite the journey in terms of all the sexual experience and enthusiasm, I guess I would say, and then a real coming to terms with how she behaved and how she wished she had done it differently, and then what she's doing differently with her children. And while she and I have some different perspectives about things, this is her story. So her story about that, what I'm calling playing with fire, and then really, rooting in faith and in perspective, I guess, a viewpoint about what she wants intimacy to be in her life. So she's here to share that story, and I hope you enjoy it. The Better Sex Podcast is brought to you by the Sex Without Stress online course. It's a course for couples to escape the cycle of disappointment, avoidance, and pressure in your sex life. So if you're in a pretty good relationship, there's a lot of love and goodwill, but sex is your struggle, this could be for you. You work in the privacy of your own home and at your own pace to create a sex life you can both look forward to. If you want to learn more, go to sexwithoutstress.com/program. Camille, thank you so much for being on the show with me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So in these personal stories, I like to sort of get a little introduction to you, like where your story started. Give us a little bit of the background.
So I like to call myself a late bloomer. I remember when I was really young, and I'm going through this now as I have a 5, almost 6-year-old and a 4-year-old, and they're both boys. And all the little kids in class are seriously already talking about who they're going to marry. And I'm like, how is this even possible? Wow. And it's so crazy. So, but then I think back to when I was that age and how I definitely had crushes on boys, but I was a late bloomer. I didn't have a lot of guys who were interested in me. And I remember having this like phobia that nobody would ever love me. I was like, this is crazy. Like no one's ever going to like me. And I had this real fear about like kissing a boy for the first time. Mm-hmm. And I didn't really talk to my mom about it. And my dad is a really quiet person. So like, definitely wouldn't talk to my dad about it. But even my mom, it was just not a conversation that was had. And I remember like, it took me a very, very long time to have that first kiss. My first kiss, I was 13, and it was with actually my husband. So it's just so crazy because I look back and I'm like, okay. So it took me a while. And yes, there were boys that liked me before that, but I was super shy, like ridiculously shy. And I didn't know how to be around boys. It was just very awkward for me. And so when I met David, we were 13, and he was equally as awkward as I was. So it was a perfect match.
So when you say you weren't talking to your mom about this stuff, are you talking about sex in general? Or are you just talking about boys and dating and
none of
any
it.
Of it. Okay.
Like, we weren't very vocal about that aspect of life, relationships in general. I never saw my parents as very touchy-feely. They weren't very hyper emotional. My mom also came from a background where they didn't really show a lot of emotion, and we didn't really say I love you all that often. So that was something that I basically took the reins on as I grew up, and I started saying I love you, mom and dad. Like it came more from me, I think. And maybe my mom did tell me she loved me, but it wasn't the way that I see it is now, where we make a conscious effort to do that. Whereas like my husband's family, they would say, I love you all the time. Like every time they would hang up the phone, it's I love you, I love you, I love you. And that wasn't, I just remember that wasn't us, and that was him.
Right.
And even though they talked about, or they would say, I love you, they didn't really talk about sex or relationships in their household either. So David was extremely, extremely naive. And I'm going to tell you a really funny story that you're probably going to be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe she's telling me this. But so we started dating when we were 13, and we were so awkward. We wouldn't even hold hands. It was just crazy. And then he was playing travel ball, baseball, and he ended up breaking up with me over the phone and was like, I don't really want to be tied down. So it was just like really, really awkward. And he broke up with me, and then he came back our freshman year. He was like, whoa, like he saw me, and I guess I had blossomed because that's what happens over the summer from 8th to 9th grade.
Right.
And he wanted me back, but I was like this super bitch, like rude, and just like, I wanted nothing to do with him, but secretly I still liked him.
Right.
So that was really the beginning of when we finally got back together, and where the relationship blossomed was once we turned 14, our freshman year. And then I kind of said, okay, when he finally asked me out, I said, okay, I'm going to take the initiative this time. I'm not going to do this whole not holding hands. Like I'm going to actually put myself out there. And our relationship flourished a little bit too quickly. And I think because we were so sheltered for so long, when we were 14, we kind of like jumped into this relationship together, and we got very intimate at times where we really weren't ready to be intimate. And I think because I didn't have my faith rooted in God at that time either, so I had no reason not to be sexually active or to do these things. And my parents weren't talking to me about it. His parents weren't talking to him about it. And it was just one of those things where it's like, well, I'm attracted to him. He's attracted to me. Why not?
Were you having a sense at the time that this was sooner than you should be doing it? Like were you having any second thoughts or experiences then that you were feeling a little off with, or is this only looking back?
I want to say that during it, I was very hyper hormonal. Like the hormones were driving it.
Yeah.
So we knew that we would potentially get caught. And so this is the story that I was going to tell you, where like we were literally in the car with my mom, and we had gone to like Subway. It was like, we had come back from sports, and I was like messing around with him, and I didn't so clueless. I didn't know what I was doing. We went back to school, and we like hid in my mom's office because my mom worked at the school, and nobody knows this story, but it's so bad. And I was like messing with him, but I didn't know what would happen. And eventually he like ejaculated everywhere. And I was like, what is that? Like, I literally didn't even know what was happening. I was like, I didn't put two and two together that like me touching him was going to cause that to happen.
Yeah.
I was so clueless.
Wow.
And I was 14 years old. So this is like, okay, sex ed 101. Like I should have known, but I had never lived or understood how that really worked in reality, just in textbooks.
Right.
So that was really when it all started. And then at 14, we just basically jumped in head first, and we had no understanding of really what we were doing. We were completely clueless, and we didn't even think about the repercussions really.
Were you doing anything to prevent, pregnancy and disease? Or is that on your radar at all?
It wasn't at all.
Okay.
We would pull out and pull out and pull out. And that was like basically all we did. And then eventually we got condoms here and there. Like, I want to say we went to Planned Parenthood and we got the free condoms because the girls that were older than me took us to go get condoms. And it wasn't my husband and I, or my boyfriend and I at the time, but it was like a group of us girls were going to Planned Parenthood because a lot of the girls in the class above me who were my friends were very sexually active.
Right.
And so there was just a big group of us that were sexually active in high school. And some of them were very promiscuous, like doing things that you would definitely not want to be doing. And so when I say that I regret it, what I'm thankful for is the fact that I ended up with my husband and that I never got pregnant.
Yeah.
What I regret is not having given myself the time and the understanding of what it really means to be intimate with someone.
Yeah.
For me, it was just the act and not so much the emotions of, okay, if I'm going to make love to someone, I'm going to make love to them. I'm going to give my body to them because they love me and I love them, not just because I'm seeking satisfaction, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Because I'm kind of old school in that way now. I think as I've gotten older, and I'm 32 now, and I think as I've gotten older, my views of sex have grown a little bit more conservative because I understand more the importance of intimacy. And
so did the two of you just go along through your whole high school time? I mean, just sort of messing around, having fun without any thought? I mean, when did that change into something else?
Pretty much. I had a scare, and this is not something I'm proud of because I now being Christian and everything, I don't believe in abortion. That's just my personal opinion. And at the time, I would just say, well, if I got pregnant, I would just go get an abortion. Like, I didn't think about it. And I think that's why I have issues with abortion, because I feel like a lot of people just say, well, if it happens, well, I'm just going to go abort the baby, and not really think about the magnitude of what it is that they're doing to their body, the damage and the hurt and the pain that comes from that. The postpartum, or not postpartum, the post-traumatic stress, because there is post-traumatic stress involved in that. And so I didn't think about any of that. I just said, well, whatever, if it happens, it happens. Eventually, I had a situation where I thought, oh my gosh, I don't know if this could lead to a pregnancy, because he might have ejaculated a little bit inside of me this time around. So I got a prescription for the morning after pill. And I did take it. I was so sick. I mean, it was terrible. And that's when two of my mom's friends, who happen to be teachers of mine and good friends of ours, basically, they helped me through the situation. And then one of them took me to a gynecologist, and I got on the pill. And so I got on the pill. I think I was 16. So
at that point, a friend is doing this with you. Your mom still doesn't know?
Okay. No, my mom. So you know what? I don't know if my mom knew. I think. Okay. I don't know if she knew, actually. I can't remember.
Yeah.
There's a chance she knew. There's a chance I reached out to someone else and said, hey, I need help with this.
Right.
So, and they were basically teachers and friends of mine that were a little bit older than me. So they were like in their 20s, where I was like 16. Like, they weren't significantly older, but they were people that I felt like I could talk to about my relationship with David.
Right.
And it was so awkward at that point. I was like, oh my gosh, now they know I'm sexually active. Like, this is just, but at least I was 16. I wasn't 14 anymore. So I got through a couple years where it wasn't like a known thing. But yeah, David and I were just very hypersexual and like doing things when we shouldn't have been doing them, and like in the classroom, like touching each other. Like, I look back and I'm like, oh my gosh, like, and this is coming from two kids who graduated at the top of their class. Like, I graduated valedictorian and he was salutatorian. He was a star athlete. We were the star couple. Like, good kids, yet we didn't understand what we were doing sexually. We just kind of like felt
kind of playing with fire,
Yeah, we were playing with fire, and we were just very, very, very lucky.
Yeah.
Nothing ever happened. And I am very happy to say that I did end up marrying him, because if I hadn't, it would have been like, oh my gosh, like, what did I do? But but still, I mean, not that it makes it any better.
Yeah.
What I did when I was so young. So.
Right. So how, when did the shift? I mean, you got on the pill. I mean, that's good, right? But when did you start to sort of shift your sense of what intimacy is even for, or how you wanted to participate in it?
So I want to say, so we got married when we were 23.
Mm-hmm.
So we had been together. He actually proposed on our 10-year dating anniversary. So we had been together for a very, very long time. Before that, when we actually went to two different universities, he went to the University of Virginia. I went to the University of Miami. We couldn't go to the same university just because it's not that we couldn't, but I chose to stay in Miami and he chose to go off. So there was a year there where we took off, like we split up because I told him, I said, look, babe, I love you, you love me, but if we're going to marry each other and that's the path we're on, I want to make sure we don't have any regrets. Right. So my quote unquote regrets was the fact that I'd never been with anybody else and that he had never been with anybody else.
Right.
Part of it was me and my own insecurities wanting to know that he wasn't going to in the future say, well, I've never been with another girl.
Right.
I've never had any other experiences. But then it ended up turning into, well, I want to have other experiences too. And I did. I had a couple experiences while we were apart for that 1 year. And I look back and I subjected myself. Like I allowed myself to be an object to other men and have their way with me when they shouldn't have. And if I had had any self-confidence, I would have never done what I had done. And I didn't do anything crazy by any means, but just the fact that I opened myself and I allowed men to have sex with me who I did not love and who I didn't know for that long, who I didn't take time to really develop a strong relationship with. I just kind of, it was like, okay, well, that's just what you do. Like, you're just intimate with people. Like, it's like kissing. No, it's really not like kissing. Like, kissing is the first step. This is like many steps later. And I've come to realize now after years and years of marriage, and also as my faith has grown, which really my husband and I, we really didn't become strict Christians, and now we're Catholic actually, but we didn't become strict Christians until we were married. Like, it was after we were married.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That happened. So this was all stuff that I didn't have I really didn't have a foundation. And I feel like if you don't have a foundation for your reasoning, you're not really going to see a reason not to do it. It's just. So
it sounds like your context, I guess, for sex really, I mean, it grew slowly, and it sounds like it grew largely after getting married. Like, as your faith grew, because you got rooted in that, then it's almost like pieces fell into place, right? Like this all clicked together. Yeah, exactly.
And I think a big part of that too was after marrying, you know, they all say your sex life goes downhill, right? Because now it's like you're married, and David and I had been together for a while. So it wasn't like our sex life hadn't stumbled a little bit along the way, and he wanted it more than I did. And I always said, well, I'm just not that sexual anymore. Well, I was sexual at one point, so I knew that there was a possibility of me being sexual. It was just that maybe he was becoming too familiar, right?
Right.
And so I had to make an effort, like a conscious effort, to say, I'm going to take care of my husband, you know? And I don't know how that sounds, like if that sounds so like submissive, but really it was like, I knew that if I made myself available to my husband and I gave of myself to him, it would make him happier. And in turn, it would make us have a stronger relationship. And what I found happened is that then I started to enjoy sex more. I wanted to have more sex.
Right.
Because the absence of it just seems like, oh, whatever. But then suddenly you start being more intimate with each other and you're like, okay, this isn't so bad. Like,
well, it's interesting because what you're describing is something I talk to my sex therapy clients a lot. So on the one hand, people may have, and maybe you have, more of a reactive sex drive. So it's not on your mind. You don't really feel spontaneous interest. But if you start, if you get going, right, you get turned on. It's like all that enjoyment kind of unlocks. And you don't get that unless you start. And the other thing you're sort of talking about is interesting because in college, you gave yourself away and let people have sex with you in a way that didn't feel good to you, right? Like didn't come from a choice or an intention or a powerful place. Yet with your husband, it's like you can let him have sex with you from a very different place, and that feels good.
Mm-hmm.
Like we can do the same thing from sort of two different places. And you've had both experiences.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And so the first person that I actually got into a relationship with after David and I broke up in college was actually a man who was much older than me. I was 19. He was in his 40s. I kid you not. And he pursued me and pursued me and pursued me. And I was like, this is disgusting. Like, leave me alone. I was doing real estate in Miami, and he pulled up, and from the moment that he was there, he had his eye on me. He wanted me. He knew he was going to get me. And it was this chase. And then he kind of like, and this had happened to me a lot as a realtor. Men say, I want your help in real estate. But all they want to do is get laid, you know? And that happened to me way too many times, where I had to finally say, look, you're not going to buy anything from me. I'm cutting this. Like, I'm walking the other way. Right. And many times I was able to stop it. But in his case, he somehow subdued me. Is that really is that the right word?
You mean manipulated you, or did he physically subdue you?
No. So he it's almost like he cast a spell over me. You know what I mean? Yeah. Over time, and the word's eluding me at this moment, but over time, I started to let my barriers down, right? And bring them down and say, okay, you know what? Maybe you're not so bad. Maybe you're not so bad. Maybe you're not so bad. But he was a man who, at the time when I was 19, I was in the best shape of my life. Like, I was literally super, super fit. I was working out like crazy, which in retrospect was not the best thing, because I was like too focused on working out and the hours I spent in the gym. But he was a guy who was like fixated on my looks. And then he would like notice that I had scars on my body, which I've always thought scars were like, you know, they give you character. And he's like, well, we can just laser that off. Well, we can just laser that. Like, all his focus was on what was physical. The physical appearance. And of course, he had been with models. He had been with all these people that were done up with tons of plastic surgery, and he was a millionaire. So he could afford to, you know, dish out money for plastic surgery. So for him, that was the norm and that was acceptable. So eventually I said, you know what, I'm done here. I don't like how this relationship is making me feel. I feel like I'm an object, a piece, and he did not like that. And he didn't take it very well. And he never spoke to me again, even though I tried to like maintain a friendship there. Didn't want anything to do with me. So that was that. Then shortly after that, I ended up with a kid from school, from the University of Miami, who took me out on a date, you know, and literally like got me wasted, like got me so drunk. I've never been that drunk in my life, because I used to never drink. I really was a good girl. I never did drugs. To this day, I've never done drugs. I've never smoked. Like, I don't like substances. I don't like to do any of that, but I will drink a little bit here and there. Well, he got me so wasted going to a club in Miami. And then on the way back, he was driving. He's like, oh, so we'll get in the bath and like whatever. And I'm like thinking, I don't have a bathing suit. Like, you know, and then he put me in his bath, basically bathed me, and then proceeded to sleep with me. Like, it was like this ritual. And I was like, and then I kind of maintained that relationship with him on and off, even though we weren't boyfriend and girlfriend, just because there was like this sick, I don't know what it was. Like, I needed to be wanted. I needed to feel like somebody wanted me. And so it was very, very unhealthy. And then it just got to a point where I'm like, okay, I have no self-esteem. Like, this is just not healthy. And that was that. And then I broke up and I didn't break up with him, but I was just like, okay, we're done here. And then I got back together with David, and that was, you know, he's just always he's such a gentleman in comparison to what I had experienced before. And he would never treat me like these other men had treated me, even if I had met him later on.
Right.
To the point where I know he had been with someone while we were apart, and she was a virgin, and she had even said it. And he's like, I don't want the responsibility of taking your virginity, you know? And how many men would jump at that chance, you know? Right. So I don't know. I feel very lucky that I did end up with my husband, and I wanted to honor him and honor our marriage by continually trying to be more intimate with him. And in turn, it helped me. It really did make me enjoy intimacy much more, because like you said, I was reactive to sex. Like, I was waiting to be turned on. I was waiting for something. And people say that when you're married, a lot of times, especially after having kids, you have to schedule sex to make it happen. And that's basically what we started doing. We started saying, okay, we're going to make an effort to do something tonight. Because if you don't, then you can go months and months and months.
Yeah, life can totally take over. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Hi, it's Jessa here, taking just a quick break. Thanks for listening so far. I wanted to let you know about the sex quiz that I've put together called How Healthy Is Your Sex Life? I've taken a close look at the typical ways that I see couples get into trouble with sex, including avoidance, neglect, negativity, distraction, and boredom. And the free quiz will score your individual results based on these factors. And then I provide my recommendations and ideas, including my top 10 sex tips, which will help you make instant improvement. If you'd like to take the quiz and see how healthy your sex life is, you can do it right now at sexhealthquiz.com.
I don't know how much you want to speak about your faith perspective on this, but how do you think about sex now? Like, how has it shifted from when you started out at 14?
Yeah.
What's the context or the conceptualization, I guess, that you have now?
So I believe that our heart. So and I listened to this course by Lisa Bevere. She actually had done it with one other person, and I forgot who it was. And it was Moms of Men, and it was a course on how to teach men to be respectful men as they grow up. Because I have the two boys, and I wanted to make sure that my boys were going to respect women, right? Not objectify them. And that's what I meant earlier. I said I was objectified.
Okay.
So I want them to respect women and to also be very cautious of how they give of themselves and their heart, because what they made a beautiful, beautiful point that your heart, every time you give of yourself to someone, a piece of your heart is given to that person, and you will never forget that experience. So when you marry someone, you want to have your full heart, right? You want to be able to give your entire heart to that person. And if you've been giving yourself away to so many people, suddenly you have less and less and less of a heart to be able to give to the person that you love, because in the back of your mind, you're never going to unsee or undo what you've done. And you're like those, if you've loved someone else, they're always going to be in the back of your mind. You're always going to remember them, you know?
All right. So when you took this course, it sounds like a little while ago, and this resonated for you. This made sense with the way you experience things. Okay.
Exactly. So it did resonate with me. And I talked to David about it, and I said, look, you may not have loved the people you were with. I didn't love the people I was with, but will you ever forget those experiences? And he's like, no, I won't. Because that's just human nature. And I know I won't. Like, I will always have a picture in my mind of those experiences. They will always be there.
Yeah.
So how I look at it as such a privilege to be able to say, listen, I love you wholly, and there's nothing else that's gotten in the way of that. And there's no other person that's taken any of my love or my feelings or my thoughts or my memories, because they're all yours.
So this lines up then with how glad you are that you have married David, because you had such a long history with him. From your perspective, right? If you married somebody else, that would have been a lot of memories that you would always have.
Exactly.
That would get in the way for you.
Exactly. So that's really why I'm so grateful that I married him, because we have so many amazing memories together, and we've lived through so much. And I think in the course, what they were talking about was whether or not you should allow your kids to date from a very young age. And what they did is that they basically said, look, you shouldn't really date someone or engage in giving of yourself unless you see a future marrying them. Right? Mm-hmm. Because if you do, you're going to have those memories. You're going to have those things that accumulated over time that then now you can't give to your spouse later on in the future. And you're always going to remember them. So it might seem extreme. A lot of people feel, and it's why I said to David when we broke up, like, I want you to experience something else. And now I feel differently, right?
Yeah.
Now I wish I didn't have those terrible experiences, because they did nothing to lift me up. All they did was tear me down. They, if anything, they showed me that I was way too insecure, and that I needed to be more secure. But they're not something I would want any of my friends to go through. I wouldn't want them to be subjected to people that treated them that way.
Yeah.
So, that's just basically how I feel. And then as far as like now there is, Pope John Paul II had come out with a book about, it's the theology of the body. Have you ever heard of theology of the body?
I haven't. No.
Okay. So basically he broke down how God created man and woman to be intimate. It's beautiful. And really it teaches you that intimacy is not something to be feared. It's not something to not be spoken about. You should talk about it quite openly, like, because God made us to be intimate. I mean, we couldn't procreate if we didn't have a vagina and a penis, right? So like, these are the things that why I don't have a problem talking to my kids about it. And they're very, very young. But that course that I took, also Moms of Men, also talked about specific books that were age appropriate for how to teach children about sex. And there are some that start very, for the very, very young kids, about God created a man and a woman. You were in the belly, you came out through the vagina. Like, I think it's like by book 2 for ages 2 to 4 or something like that, they actually say vagina.
Right.
And I was like, I feel like, who's it? Like, if you're in a restaurant and you scream out vagina, who's going to like freak out? Like, what? You don't say that, but it's a real word. Like, it's not something to be ashamed.
Just a body part, right?
It's a body part, but we say it with shame. Like, even, I don't know, it's just like there's something when you say vagina, it just seems like so shameful. And I don't want my kids to feel that. I want them to be able to come to me or to David and talk to us about their emotions and their feelings, because they say statistically that the person that talks to you about sex the first time is the person you're going to go to when you have questions about sex. Yeah. And so you don't want your friend, right? Or in my case as a parent, you don't want your kids' friends to be the first ones to talk to them about sex. You want to be the first one, so that when they do have questions, they feel comfortable enough to come to you and talk to you about it.
It almost sounds like, I mean, not exactly like reparenting, but your experience in parenting young kids now is a way for you to do this differently, even for yourself, right? Like, there's a healing. It seems that's what I think I'm hearing, is there's a healing for you in these messages and in this mindset that of course you're passing on to your children. Yeah. But you get to sort of hold on to yourself too.
Yeah. Because I think that there's a little bit of shame and guilt in the way that I composed myself and the way that I behaved when I was so young. And this is like me repenting of those sins, because I feel like it was so sinful of me to basically, I was literally lusting over David, because we were so young and all it was sex. Like, at the time, like, I obviously wasn't in love with him. I didn't even know what love was when I didn't even know that his ejaculate was going to come out. Like, how could I understand love? So that's why I feel like, yes, it's so critical. And David feels 100% on board with me about this. It is so critical that we are open with our kids. Yeah. And it's gotten to a point, like, my kids are so close to me. I nursed my second up until he was almost 3 years old. And to this day, he's 4. He still tries to grab booby, because it's like comforting for him. Right. And it gets to a point, my mom's like, Camille, this is crazy. This is like obscene. And I have to be like, oh, the police are going to come get you if you keep touching my boobie, because I don't know how to get him to stop touching me. Because it gets to a point where it's like, okay, this kid's going to be 7 or 8 years old and grabbing my boob in public. Like, this is not okay. So it's like trying to navigate through all of that. And they're like, they still watch me shower sometimes. And I try to like remove myself from that, where I'm like, okay, mommy needs privacy, but you also don't want to make it uncomfortable for them, because they're going to start, from what I've been told from other friends too, and other people, is eventually they're not going to want you to see them. So they're going to feel like, okay, I don't want to see her, Yeah,
but it's trying, navigating these boundaries, right? Trying to find your way through the forest. What's the path, with openness and yet boundaries.
Yeah, it's hard. Yeah. And then, like, they'll come in on me in the bathroom when I'm on my period, and they'll see the blood, and it's like, oh, mommy has a Band-Aid on. And then I have to like explain. So then my little one's like, so you're bleeding out of your butt? Like, he doesn't really understand. And I'm like, no. Right. So I explained to him that I'm bleeding because mommy's not pregnant. And if I had gotten pregnant, so it's like trying to openly help him understand, because I remember when I was young, I would see pad commercials on TV, and I had no idea what those were. I was like, right, what is that for? And I was a girl. Like, you would think that I would know that a pad was for your period, but no, completely clueless. And I think my kids would see a pad on TV and probably know what it was. Now.
Is there any, sort of last question, but it makes me curious about your mom watching you parent. Mm-hmm. If she's reacting, because she obviously did it such a different way, does that cause any tension, or is there just curiosity around that?
No, I think she respects the way that we're parenting. And it's actually interesting because my mom and dad live with us, believe it or not. So she gets a like real close up view to how we parent. And that's where she will say, Camille, he can't touch your boob. Like, what is this? You know, and the fact that, you know, maybe they'll see me naked. Like, she was not like that, but she doesn't necessarily criticize me for it. It's more, I don't know that they should see you naked kind of thing. Yeah. She's pretty open. I think I've told her that I want them to have an open relationship with us because I don't want them to go through what David and I went through where we couldn't talk to our parents.
Yeah.
And I remember when we were younger too, my mom had told David's mom, like, I think Camille and David are having sex. And she's like, what? He wouldn't even know what to do. Like, you know, so our parents were just so, they knew that we didn't understand sex.
Right.
So for them, it was like, how could they possibly be doing that if they don't know what they're like actually doing or how to do it? You figure it out, right?
Yeah, right. as so many different young people are doing all the time.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just, it's getting worse. Like I see kids now, like having sex in their, you know, 12, 11, 10 years old. And it's scary. Like, I don't want my kids to do that.
Yeah. And this is exactly why, you know, research shows that abstinence only education doesn't work. Mm-hmm. You know, I think people think we just don't tell kids about this, they just won't do it. But the reality is they're going to go blindly in there and mess up, you know?
Yeah. We didn't have any we didn't have sex ed, now that I think about it at all. We went to a prep school. That wasn't a thing. I mean, there was science, right? Like you had science, we talked about it, but no, I don't necessarily think that ignoring it is the way to go. I think it's more important to talk about it and not make it shameful. Right. And I think when there's an open dialogue, then you take the shame away from it.
Yeah.
Because when you don't talk about it, it's like, oh, that's forbidden. Like, we don't want to talk about it because it's like, ew. But no, let's talk about it. Let's make it where it's completely normal and healthy. These kids need to know, they need to understand that sex was why, like, we were created to have sex.
Yeah.
So why be ashamed to talk about it? Yeah. So I don't know. I'm trying my very hardest to talk to my kids about it from a very, very young age so that they don't go through what I went through, because I don't want them to have the regrets. And also there's always a chance that they could get a girl pregnant. Like I want them to understand that too. And I had friends in college. I actually had a very, very good friend of mine who had multiple abortions because she would sleep around and abortion. And I'm like, this is not birth control. Like, you don't just sleep around, get pregnant, have an abortion, sleep around, you know, and I even took her to get an abortion. So it's like my life, my whole perspective has changed.
Yeah.
Because to me, it's about being proactive, right? And like knowing why you're being intimate in the first place and not just giving yourself to men because, you know, you're falling into your own desires. Like, that's just, to me, that's just, I don't want to say sinful, but that's what sin is. Sin is when you're
but for you, right?
Yeah.
It's sinful. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just basically like saying, okay, I want this. I'm going to have it. I'm going to do what I want, but it's a lot more than that, I think. So, yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing all this. And it sounds like there's some stories nobody's heard before, but
yeah, there's a lot of fun stuff. If I don't know that I'm going to share this with my family because if they heard it, they might like freak out. But yeah, I mean, I'm 32 now. I can kind of say like, you know, that's in the past.
Right.
We're past that now. And thankfully things have worked out.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Better Sex. Please visit our website, bettersexpodcast.com, for show notes and additional episodes.
And that's a wrap for today. I really hope you enjoyed the episode. If you are enjoying the podcast, if some of this material resonates with you and you would like to make a difference and make sure that this keeps coming out in the world once a week, ongoing, there are a couple things you could do to show your appreciation. The first would be to go to iTunes and rate and review the show. That really helps us be found by new listeners when you review the show on iTunes. You can find a link at bettersexpodcast.com/iTunes. The other thing I want to invite you to consider is becoming a Patreon. For a small monthly pledge, you get some benefits. So for $2 a month, you get advance access to every single episode. For $5 a month, you get a chapter of my upcoming new book. And for $10 a month, I host quarterly get to know you and question and answer chats over the web, and you get invited to that. I would love to have your membership in that, become part of the Better Sex family. You can find a link at bettersexpodcast.com/Patreon, which is Patreon. Again, thanks for listening. I'm glad you're here. Feel free to comment, ask questions, get in touch. I'd love to hear from listeners. Thanks.